Hello, and welcome to episode 118 of the Game Brew Podcast, the bi-weekly video game podcast where we sip delicious beers, discuss video games, and what the heck does that blinking red light mean? I am your host, Ian Adam Malkovich Richard, and I'm joined this week by Chris, Baby Metroid, right? And Bobby Ridley Brown.
Hello.
This week, on the first half of the show, we'll talk about some games that nailed the use of user interface, and in the second half, we'll talk about the balance between immersion and gameplay. But first, it's time for a beer. Chris, what are you drinking this week?
Well, it's Oktoberfest season, so I'm drinking Oktoberfest.
Sticking to your guns,
This
huh?
week I'm drinking the Spaten Oktoberfest. It's one of my favorites. It's pretty dark and malty. It's one of the tents I spent the most time in 2019.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Little humble brag right there.
Not so humble, just coming off like brag.
But yeah, no, it's one of my favorite Oktoberfest. It's a little more flavorful than the other ones, but still very drinkable. Super malty, delicious color. Look at that right there.
Oh yeah, look at that. That's beautiful.
Delicious.
Very cool. A darker, maltier German beer seems like a nice way to sort of like wrap up Oktoberfest.
Oh, it's not
season.
wrapping up. Still got like a week left. Well, I guess by the time
my
this
bad.
comes out, it'll be done, I think.
Yeah. Bob, what are you drinking over there?
I am drinking Rossbrau. It's the Black Forest Marzen.
Ooh.
Really tasty. Go along with the Oktoberfest theme. Drinking the German beer.
It's by Rathaus.
By Black Forest, is it like related to the cake at all?
Like Black Forest cake?
Yeah, like Schwarzwald Kirschtorte.
No, I think it's just made in the Black Forest region. It's from a brewery called Rathaus Brau.
Nice. How's it taste, Bob?
Amazing. Not super rich, but very earthy, like the Marzens are. Almost to the point of creaminess, but
Oh, that sounds delicious.
Mine says it's an Marzen or Marzen.
Ooh, Marzen? Yeah, I don't know what that means.
I thought you were a resident German expert.
Yeah, I'm not. Old recipe, although is not really the word for old as far as I know, but that's interesting.
Maybe Old Marzen? Old recipe, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
So the word originally from Old High German.
There you go. Game Brew facts right there. What are you drinking?
I am drinking the California Ace Pineapple Craft Cider.
And that's completely different than what we're drinking.
It is completely different than what you're drinking. Yeah, absolutely. It's so it's a pineapple cider, obviously. Not something that I would have bought at the store to be like, I'm going to drink this. But I'll tell you what, I'm actually enjoying it a lot more than a lot of the like regular ciders that I have. Fee brought this over, I think last week when he and Allison came over to play Gloomhaven.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so I'm just sort of clearing the rest of it out of my fridge. And like I said, not something that I would have bought to drink myself, but really I've been enjoying it. It's very fruity, very like, it would be a good thing to have during the summer. And I also think you could do some really fun stuff with this cider and some like coconut and some like
Malibu.
I want to say rum, yeah, and like really get this thing
That's
going.
awesome.
But
Is
but
it
it's
apple-y?
good. I'm enjoying it. Is it apple-y? It's not really apple-y. It's more pine-apple-y.
Oh, yes, drinking out of the customary pickle jar.
Drinking out of the customary pickle jar. It's like, it's sweeter than an apple cider, but the like tropicalness of the pineapple kind of makes it okay. Whereas like a regular apple cider, I really don't want it to be that sweet. Thus, I'm kind of okay with it. It tastes very much like a pineapple gummy bear.
Oh,
it's like
okay.
exactly the flavor profile.
That's awesome.
It's great.
Get into that.
Yeah, it's a pineapple gummy bear, but it'll also get you drunk and fizzy. So
I love
all right.
pineapple gummy bears to get me drunk. I used to have those in college. Rummy bears, delicious.
Oh man! So what do you all been up to this week? Anything good?
Finally started playing Watch Dogs Legion. Caught it on sale.
Very interesting. Yes, tell me your thoughts.
So far I'm really liking it. I love the Watch Dogs franchise, but didn't feel like paying like $90 for Legion when it came out.
Right.
So finally caught it on sale. So far it's been really good. I've got maybe about 6 hours into it so far, and I've just been hardcore focusing side quests because this one lets you. You're not a character, you are DedSec, so you get to recruit players, and you have to find them and then do a mission to. It's one of those things where, hey, you're DedSec, I want to join, but you have to solve my problem first.
Right.
So running around doing a bunch of those. Ubisoft pulled an Ubisoft, and there's some Assassin's Creed references thrown in, and so you actually get to do missions for the Brotherhood.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that's been pretty fun.
That's fun. Moving toward the Ubiverse.
Oh yeah.
What's the story like in that game?
The Ubiverse. I can't wait for the Far Cry universe to get in there too.
I mean, honestly, it could. I could see it happening. So this one's based in London. Basically, it starts off with you being in DedSec, and then the DedSec is set up and framed for multiple bombings across the city that kill countless people. And so in all the chaos, the government steps aside and privatized military comes in and takes over and locks the city down. And so drones are flying around everywhere doing facial scans. There's checkpoints every couple blocks that you have to go through. And so it's about kind of reactivating DedSec and fighting back for control over the city. So
that's a really interesting narrative, kind of like technology being both used as an oppressing tool, but also kind of like a tool for like rebelling or fighting back against it.
It's crazy because in the previous ones, like, you were getting chased by cops, you just had to break line of sight from cops and you're fine. But now, the more you progress, the more drones start chasing you, and you have to think about getting around corners, getting high ground, getting low ground, just hopping in a car and trying to run. But if you run to a checkpoint, it triggers and they automatically know where you are again. So it adds a lot more kind of 3D mentality when it comes to evading. They definitely prioritize being stealthy, but they give you the option to go live. A lot of the operatives you can pick up don't have weapon training, so you're using their non-lethal weapons that DedSec provides you. And so I've been going around kind of trying to target some people to get more weapons-oriented people for the more heavier fight scenes.
Quick question. So you mentioned that you can be like a bunch of different people. Is there permadeath for those players? Like those people if you lose them, like, or if they get caught or anything like that?
So some of them have, as one of their traits, death could be permanent. But most of the time you're either hospitalized or arrested, and you can recruit people that are like paramedics or lawyers to reduce your cooldown time for how long they're out of action.
I love that. That's so smart.
So the first time I did it, I had a guy go down in a fight, and he was out for like an hour, and that's like an hour of like actual playtime.
Right.
I found the paramedic, and next time I went down, he was only out for like 20 minutes. And then something similar with if you're arrested, and that's just based on where you go down at. If you're fighting with the military, you're arrested. If you're fighting with like one of the gangs, you're hospitalized. Or if you get hit by a car not paying attention, you're hospitalized.
That's awesome. And then how do you feel about playing a bunch of different players or like a bunch of different people? Like, do you get attached to your players, or is it like kind of you're more attached to DedSec?
I'm more attached to DedSec. I try to hit everyone up because the really cool thing about it is your team is just spread across London. So you finish a mission, it's like, all right, your next objective's over here. Instead of having to look for like the closest fast travel point or the closest this, someone's already close to it and says, this operative is investigating this activity. So you can literally just hop operatives. I have a couple operatives. I think they're both my paramedic and one of my lawyers that they're not great because they have flaws in them. Like, one of the guy's flaws is flatulence. So when sneaking, he'll literally fart and alert people close by to him.
That's really, really
That's funny. One of my traits too.
And that's same. It's also cool that that like having multiple characters and having them have different traits and different personalities means that you're never playing like generic tough guy video game character, right? It allows for like the weird, goofy hacker guy who's doing whatever. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, no, it's been really funny to see like just the amount of people, and like as you're walking around, you get to pull out your phone and see people who are supportive that you can start a recruitment mission with, or you can see people that they might have the traits you want, but they don't support DedSec, and you can actually do a deep dive on the phone to see what they're doing. If they're, I think one of the ones I was looking at, it was another paramedic to bring on. He was like doing something at a hospital and protesting at this rally. You can investigate those events to help them go better and improve his thoughts on DedSec to then further recruit him down the line.
That's interesting.
So, like, I mean, most of the city is open for you to at least attempt to push people to join.
Right. And you can sort of like influence the ones that aren't immediately available to then kind of turn them to your side later.
That's really cool.
That is cool. If you had to give it a number of dead mouse hats out of 5, how many dead mouse hats would you give it?
I would give it 4 in the ears of the 5th.
Nice.
What
Very
made
good.
you think dead mouse ears?
Well, because they have those in-game cosmetics, unless I'm wrong, where it kind of looks like a dead mouse like setup.
Yeah, there's tons of funky masks and stuff, because that was one of the fun things. They were like, it's like, we can't do anything about your identity. Well, we can. It's called a mask.
How novel.
Yeah. How novel.
How novel.
Chris, what have you been up to?
Let's go for you first, because what I'm doing,
Oh,
because
me?
I'm going, mine leads in pretty well.
Oh, I see.
What have you been doing?
So
okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I have been playing this cool couch co-op puzzling game with Marianne on the Xbox. We finished Children of Morta a couple weeks back, and I've since kind of been like looking at stuff and trying to find out what our next co-op game is to like sit on the couch and play together. And so we bounced off a couple of things and landed on this game called Morcred. I haven't heard anything about it. I don't think it got a ton of press, but it's on Game Pass currently, so free for those of you who are signed up for that. And it is like I was said, like a sort of isometric or top-down-ish puzzler where you have to guide this orb of light, like think of a perfect orb of light that rolls through the surroundings to various points, and your whole goal is to kind of like keep the orb of light safe, and your two characters only live when they're in the light of the orb. So if you step into shadow or your partner casts a shadow on you while you're trying to complete a puzzle, you both of you fail.
So it's like they took that one part of Gears of War 1 where you have to stay in the light the entire time.
Yeah.
And made that a game.
And made a puzzle game out of it. Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
And it's really neat. There are things that I've never thought about, like light mechanics that I've never thought about until I played this game. Like sometimes you're kind of trying to like roll the ball to get somebody else through an obstacle. And if you put the ball right next to the obstacle that the person's running next to, it casts a very large shadow, obviously, because there's more of the light is being occluded by said object. Whereas if you pull it back, it casts a narrower beam of shadow. But on the other hand, you only have so much ring around the orb in the first place. So you're sort of playing this game between like how close you want it to be to the object versus how far away it needs to be in order to like make the run actually possible. There's also a lot of things that are like trying to find a way to cross in between the orb and your partner without killing them with your own shadow. So there's a lot of like, which way are you going? Going around this way or around that way? Like try to decide where your partner is going. So it's one of those games where at first it doesn't seem like something where you're going to be doing a lot of communication with your partner. It kind of seems like you could just pull it off without talking. And then later on you're like, no, you go that way. I'll go this way and it's going to be all right.
And your relationships survived so far? No fights
Oh yeah. It's definitely not one of the more frustrating games to play together. We were playing this game that was like about robots. I'm trying to remember what it was called. It's called Death Squared. We were playing a little bit of Death Squared, which is also kind of like a couch co-op puzzling game, but that one is a lot more like cerebral and kind of like beat the level. This one is more kind of like a puzzler in the vein of like an Inside or what was the other one that was kind of like Inside? Limbo.
I'm sure there's
Limbo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of got like an Inside or like Limbo vibe where it's very, very dark. And the darkness is always kind of encroaching on your little safety circle
like life.
next to the orb.
The darkness is always encroaching on your safety circle.
And it's good. Really enjoying it.
How lenient are they with the shadows? Like, do you have a like warning, or is it pretty much insta death if you're hit by a shadow?
It is pretty much insta death. There's a little bit of play at the edge of the orb shadow, but if you cast a shadow on your partner, it's like done. And they're starting to play with mechanics now too, where it's like not only does your shadow kill your partner, it kills enemies. So you're sort of like trying to cast your shadow at specific enemies, right? By like getting in front of the ball, but not where your partner is. So avoiding friendly fire, so to speak.
So what you're saying is you should not cross the streams.
To never cross the streams ever. But it's been good. So I'm not sure how long it's going to take us to beat, but I figure it's kind of a couple of nights game is what it feels like.
Did you say you beat a game?
Hmm?
Did we celebrate that?
I don't remember. It was like in the middle of a bunch of other stuff, but we beat Children of Morta, which I would strongly recommend to anyone.
Last podcast though?
Maybe.
Well then,
strongly recommend to anybody who wants to do like a couch co-op sort of like roguelike but RPG elements and awesome wholesome family story game. It's like so heartwarming the whole game. But it's also brutal. So you lose some people in this game. You like things are lost that can never be gotten back. But there's like that sort of like darkness with consequences makes the rest of it like even more precious and kind of beautiful. So Children of Morta, highly recommended. Super buggy though, which is kind of a bummer.
That is a bummer.
Yeah.
Would you call that a medium game?
Yeah. I think medium's probably about right.
All right.
Probably spent like, I would say in the teens of hours, so that sounds good. Cool. What about you, Chris?
Well, I finally unwrapped Ghost of Tsushima. I bought it like on Prime Day, so I've been kind of waiting for some time to play it, and this weekend just felt like the right time. So
Ghost of Tsushima. This is the fish game. Yeah?
No, not at all. Because sushi.
Yeah.
Wow. Insensitive. No, Tsushima's like this tiny little island off the coast of Japan that's between Japan and Korea, which I didn't know existed until I played this game, and apparently it was invaded, if this game is to be believed, by Mongols in the 1200 sums.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's like always been disputes over who actually owns it.
Interesting.
Which is kind of interesting. Yeah. But the game.
Yes, tell me more about the game.
So, first off, the game is gorgeous. I'm not playing the super fancy PS5 version. I'm playing the PS4 version that has like the PS4 Pro-ness to it. Mm-hmm. So, but still, just absolutely gorgeous game. They spend a ton of time like making the colors really pop, and it's just, I don't know. They even kind of not force you, but they give you moments to really enjoy it. Like when you get to a vista, they'll kind of zoom out so you can kind of really absorb the whole scenery that you're seeing. There's places where you kind of write haikus and kind of reflect on the scenery around you. There's times when you're going and hanging out at spas and reflect kind of like about the things that have happened to you recently. So there's like a really cool like retrospective to this, and I think they're trying to give you kind of the flavor of some of the culture there, which I kind of really think is cool. The gameplay itself is really interesting. It reminds me a lot of The Witcher 3 as far as like some of the quest styles. They're not really just like fetch quests and stuff. It's more a little more personal than that. There's not like a ton of RPG elements to it as far as like you'll level up sort of and like increase your skills with weapons, but they're not just tossing armor at you you kind of get some armor and you upgrade it, and you'll be using that for a while. And it does give you some stat bonuses, but it's not like just constant. And there's some like talking choices that you can do, but I don't feel like they actually matter to what happens.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, so far I've been really enjoying it. And actually, one of the mechanics that I've really enjoyed the most has been the way you find different things on the map. So instead of like having a map in the corner or having like kind of a directional thing with like a marker like in Skyrim, basically you just swipe up on the PS5 pad and the wind will blow in the direction you're supposed to go.
Very
which
interesting.
Which is one of the coolest ways I've ever seen that done.
It's like a Pathfinder, but integrated into the world itself.
Yeah.
Huh. That's really neat. So I think that sort of dovetails really nicely into our first topic, right? Which is talking about making a good UI. Like, what does it mean to have a good UI in a game? And in this case, it's one that is kind of like both utilitarian and minimalist. So something like that,
and
Chris,
flavorful.
Yeah, like what does that add to the game? Like, it does something specifically mechanically, obviously, but
it makes it so you're not just staring at a map the entire time, and you get to really enjoy the scenery around you, you know? And the other thing it does, the game itself, is after a certain amount of time, it'll just take the UI elements away, so you're just watching yourself ride in like this beautiful scenery. And I think that is one of the best things they could have done. And like, if you want it to come back, it comes back super fast, but it really just allows you to be there and enjoy this beautiful place they've made. That is also a real place.
That is also a real place. Yeah. Do you generally prefer UIs that are less in your face?
So I was thinking about this, and it really depends. It depends on the type of game. Like for this, yes, absolutely. And I feel like, especially in third-person games, it matters the most to have as little on the screen as possible outside of your character.
Why is that?
I think otherwise it just looks cluttered because you have your character just moving around in the center, and then you'll just have all this other stuff that just takes away from you being that character, if that makes sense.
Part of the reason the third person perspective is adopted in the first place being because they really want you to see yourself moving through that world, and that being an important part of like the artistic style and not just a gameplay choice.
Right, exactly.
Do you think that there are certain circumstances, and maybe Bob, this question can be for you. Do you think that there are certain circumstances where like a heavy or complex UI is actually really helpful and necessary?
I can't think of one where like a super complex one is necessary. I mean, I know there's games out there that have a lot of detail to them. I was thinking about like GTA 5 and Madden came to my mind. Like if you're doing franchise mode in Madden, your UI for everything is just crazy intense with everything you can choose from. But in GTA 5, I think just the characters and everything is a little bit overmuch. But I don't know, some of these games get to the point where they want to give you so many options that they drown.
Yeah, and I find that with a lot of like, especially like strategy and 4X games, there's just so much information on the screen, and it's one of the reasons why with like Hearts of Iron 4, Crusader Kings, you have to like do research to learn how to play the game.
Yeah. I do want to back up just a little bit and come back to the Madden UI, because what's really interesting about Madden is that like these franchises, the players, the fields, like the coaches, the logos, all of this it feels really important for people who are invested in those things to really have an accurate and clear representation and feel like they're there in the moment, right? But then at the same time, the complexity of the play calling structure specifically kind of means that like you really have to think about how you're going to put that up in screen. And for the longest time, it's just been these cards.
Yep. From honestly, probably since, like one of the first Maddens to almost here recently, it's just been, eight plays per page. You could flip through the playbook.
Right.
And then you had your options to audible, which, I mean, people are going in depth and they know everything about the defenses and the offensive. That's great. But I feel like some of that's cutting off the casual player base because they just want to come in and play. They want to pick their team and they want to run the offense that they at least think they know.
Right.
Well, and I think That's kind of interesting that you say that, because I haven't played Madden in a pretty long time, but I feel like they're always good about like, hey, if you just want a recommended play, here's a recommended play. And so you don't have to know all those things. But while you were talking, I was just thinking about how part of Madden is like a strategy game, like where you're picking like the best thing for that situation, and then trying to execute it. And it's kind of hard because it wants to be a strategy game in that way, but it also wants to be like an action game, and it's kind of a weird mishmash when you kind of break it down.
It's the sports ball.
The other thing with it is that it also it feels like current Madden, and maybe I'm wrong about this, Bob, so let me know if I'm wrong, but it seems like current Madden is kind of trying to be everything at the same time too. Like Chris was saying, like a strategy game where you're like picking plays and making sure people are going in the right direction. It's an action game because you're like running people down or like trying to shuffle through people in terms of like getting through them, right? But it's also kind of an RPG. You're sort of building characters and like getting XP if you're doing like a season mode. Like there's a management sim side to it. Like this game is huge, and I feel like part of the reason that the UI maybe isn't as good as it could be is because they're not just designing a UI for one game mode. They're designing a UI for 4 different game modes, which have to be fully fleshed out. And then at the end, it's kind of like, I don't know, let's do cards again. People seem to be all right with it.
Yeah, you're creating your player, you're running them through it through franchise mode. You can do owner mode where you're drafting players, just randomly generated characters 10 years from now for your team. So I can definitely see how it does have one UI. It has to basically cover 4 games at that point. And I can see it being a little overwhelming because I downloaded, I think, Madden 2021, whichever one was free on Game Pass here recently just to play something I hadn't played in a while. And I was just like, this is a lot for what. And it could also be. I haven't played Madden in about 3-4 years, but I was just enjoying it being on Game Pass.
Well, it makes sense though that they've been putting out the same game for 20 years or whatever. So I would hope there is a bunch of stuff to it.
That's true. I guess if you're gonna iterate to the end of time, you may as well continue like strapping things on to the ship that is Madden. Good ship, Madden.
At this point, honestly, I'm surprised it's not just like a yearly subscription to just a Madden, and you just get the updates with each one instead of them selling it game by game.
Well, but then you wouldn't have a reason to buy a new game every year, Bob.
Oh, you just do a yearly subscription. Just commit to it.
I'm paying my Madden tithe.
Just do it.
Just break that down monthly. It's fine.
$5 a month.
That's funny. Bring it back to like first and third person, because I realize we've wandered just a little bit. It seems like, Chris, you were saying a lot of the third person games are the ones that tend to like really focus on making the UI sort of immersive. But I've also noticed that that's true in games where you can play in the first person that are sort of third person as well. Like Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, in terms of the gameplay itself, not digging around in menus, did a really good job of like the Pip-Boy is kind of interactive, and it like has the semblance of being integrated with the world, right? Even though it's not necessarily in function. Yeah. And also thinking about like the power armor suits, whenever you're in them, you're getting like the heads up display on all the stuff that's going on. And that was a really nice way to integrate those things.
Yeah. It was really nice feeling like with the power armor, like feel like you're getting into it and you're getting like into this mech almost. And it made it feel more special than just having a different type of armor on like it did in Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas.
Yeah. And it also makes sense to have more information readily available in that situation in the game, right? Where when you're running around with like a little gun that's put together with junk that fires nails, right? You probably don't know how many nails are left in your clip. But when you have that suit, you would think like, hey, that suit's going to tell you something about the function of it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And Metroid Prime kind of did that too.
Yeah.
Which was really cool. And I think there were even moments that you could actually see Samus's face, like as a reflection on the inside of the mask, which is kind of cool. Because that was like the first time you got to see her, which is like the first Metroid Prime, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that, but I knew that Metroid Prime like played with overlays, and like that the idea of the suit being something that's really important is kind of like a common way to integrate first person UI into the play experience without breaking the fourth wall and just like slapping some logos on there and calling it a day.
What do you mean sometimes you want those logos to be slapped on? So there are some games that like a cluttered UI makes sense though.
Oh yeah, let's talk about those.
Like WoW.
Talk about a cluttered
And
UI.
I was one of those people that like the first thing I did every time that I like made a character was I would unlock all of the UIs. Until then I got the mods to do super customizable UIs, but I always liked having like all the slots so I could just put stuff wherever I wanted it, like a really cluttered like start screen, but I knew where everything was, or like I was able to like, these are all of my mounts and these are all of like my hearth is next to my mounts, and like I don't know, I had a way of organizing things.
Yeah. Do you think that style works for that game because WoW was very much focused on like go get the stuff? It really wasn't immersive in the sense of like I really want you to feel like you're in this world and you're living there, like Ghost of Tsushima, right?
Right. Yeah, no, it was very much like it was a gamey game. So like you wanted to have all of your stuff ready at all times. And it was also like one of the first games that I remember like where I spent a lot of time thinking about placement onto keyboard in relation to where my hands would normally be. Because before that, like I was pretty young and didn't really have to, have everything at once. I could just kind of play at my own pace and it was kind of easy. Whereas this, I really wanted to start optimizing like my rotations and things like that. So, yeah, like setting up your UI in a way that made sense in your brain was huge in that game. And it was cluttered.
Yeah. Yeah, so kind of maybe of that like Madden allegory where it's like there has to be a lot of information because there is a lot of information. That's just sort of like the nature of the game.
Well, it's less about information and more about access to the stuff you want it when you want it. Like, if you needed to use your parachute because you got knocked off your flying mount, you didn't want to have to like go into your character and activate it. You wanted to have it ready, even if you only used it once every year. You wanted that on your UI.
Yeah. I mean, so it was worth having like the screen clutter for the stuff that you needed to do.
Yeah, when you needed it.
Yeah. Have either of you ever played Persona 5?
I think it was either 4 or 5. I downloaded it from the PlayStation Plus subscription. It's one of like the free games you get with PlayStation Plus.
Nice.
And I remember that being like super just bright comic booky, like
yeah.
Yep, that's Persona.
Oh, so sorry, Bob, have you played the previous ones, Bob?
I haven't played them. I've seen some playthrough of them, but that art style, just I love it. I'm contemplating. It's one of my games on my mental list of things that I want to go play.
Yeah, well, go do it and then come back and report because I honestly like I was watching someone play it the other day and the reason they brought me over was like, hey, you got to see this game. And I was like, oh, I know what Persona is. It's like I could sort of like describe the general function of the game. Like it's kind of an RPG, but kind of a strategy game, but kind of like a little bit of a dating simulator. Great. I understand Persona. But then I saw it and I was like, holy shit. Like this thing's crazy. It's literally like you slapped a manga on a screen, right? And a particularly like cluttered and sort of like iconographic manga. I don't know what to say, but it uses like a lot of symbols, like in a lot of color in a way that's really important. And seeing that integrated into a UI and that being like part of the game's appeal was really cool sort of expression in video games that you don't really see or think of, right? A lot of the games I play, the UI is like pared down or slick, and the UI in Persona is literally like spiced up. Like it's there to. Yeah, exactly.
We're here. We want you to know we're here.
Yeah.
I think the only other UI that kind of really I was thinking about this is Breath of the Wild is how user-friendly it was. And I didn't notice it until more recent when I was playing. Just simple stuff like anytime you approach something and it's asking you to hit a button to do it, just that little pop-up that's not just the button to hit, but it's like the full like joypad of all 4 buttons and it shows the placement of it. You don't see a lot of games do that. A lot of games will just pop up saying hit square or hit triangle or hit this. And if you're unfamiliar with the controllers, or in my case, I'm switching back and forth between Switch and Xbox and it's like hit A and I'm like A and I'm like that's not A, that's X.
Yes.
And then being able to look at my screen, it's like, all right, hit A, and I see, oh no, A's over here now. That was something that I didn't remember. I didn't pay much attention to my first time because I think I just kind of exclusively played Breath of the Wild for a while there. But going back and forth is something I noticed that, I mean, it helped me out from switching back and forth, but I could feel like it would be something that was like for a new person to gaming be really helpful without being like overbearing.
Yeah.
So I think it was a really well done UI there.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's where we're going to wrap for the first half. When we come back, we're going to talk about immersive games and how immersiveness and gameplay tend to sort of be in tension, if not in conflict. So stick with us. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to the second half of the Game Brew Podcast, episode 118. Checking in with the bevies. How are we doing?
These Oktoberfests are mega chuggable.
Oh yes, chuggability levels for the Oktoberfest beers are high.
Super ferociously high. I'm on number 4 for somehow, and I don't know how I got here.
But here we are.
But here I am. Here we are.
Bob, how's yours treating you?
Oh, amazing. I'm not on 4, but I wish I was.
Join me.
Well, I guess that speaks well for the beer. I also am not on 4, but I'm still enjoying sipping on my pineapple cider over here. So let's dig into the second half. We sort of left off in the first half teasing the idea of immersion versus gameplay, and I really think that Breath of the Wild is an interesting place to start for this, because Breath of the Wild did such a good job of bringing you up to a place in the world and then letting you look over it and be like, that place is interesting, I want to go there. It wasn't necessarily the exploration in this game, which was such a large part of Breath of the Wild, wasn't really driven by the map, right? It didn't drop a pin for you and then tell you to go someplace. You sort of just looked around and were like, that looks cool, I want to go there. However, moment-to-moment gameplay really leaned quite heavily on sort of like awkward and sometimes harsh UI things that broke out of immersion. So like the down arrow that points on the enemy target is really like jarring. The mini map is always up. There's always like health and stuff up in the top left hand corner, and it never lets go, especially for a game that's so much about the world you're in, right?
I think that's kind of interesting that you mentioned that it has all those things, but they're also like Zelda things that have been there for a long time. So like if they weren't there, it would be kind of odd, especially in a Zelda game. What I thought you were going to go at was the fact that I'm pretty sure if you use a sword like 20 times, it's not going to just fall apart in your hand. Which I felt like was a very conscious decision, like a gamey decision to make you continually have to rotate weapons.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was also a way to think of creative ways in combat. They didn't want you to just sword and shield it, kick in the front door, and take on every enemy. They wanted you to think outside the box and take every encounter, make you think about each encounter, because there's encounters that you just don't need to do in the game, that they're just there to suck hearts away. There's also ones that you can sneak in and either sneak strike or use bombs or use metallic objects to magnesis and hit people and knock them off towers and stuff like that. I get where they came from there. I think it's a little harsh where a steel sword gets taken out in 5 or 6 hits, but that's why you just get the Master Sword and it just keeps coming back. It's fun.
Yeah, I guess I just more the bone that I was trying to pick was like all of these little pop-ups that are happening all the time in Breath of the Wild are pulling me away from this incredible world that they've built, right? And the experience of exploring that world. And it just seems like a shame that they're there to break that sense of immersion where you don't really need them, you know? Link shivers when he's cold. that's good enough for me to like the shivering and like a little maybe red flash to know that like, okay, it's cold land. I need to go put on a jacket, you know, like I need a furry hat.
You mean you don't want the thermostat telling you exactly how cold it is outside?
Right, and that's what I'm kind of getting at is like they did such a good job of putting so much in the world. I wish they would have committed more to that and not like broken my enjoyment of it with all this like kind of rather busy UI.
No, I get you.
But also, I think that might have been also for maybe people that are younger that might not pick up on that immediately. Because, I mean, they try to make it as, you know, accessible for anyone to play it, or even people that don't really play video games. And, you know, our reaction to seeing, well, I guess anyone shivering is kind of a reaction to go put on more clothes. But, like, you might not know that's an option if you don't play video games that much or something. I don't know. I guess I think a lot of that has to do with accessibility.
Yeah, and sort of like bringing in a wider audience.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that's interesting? Because I think there are games like Journey, right, which is sort of really kind of meant to be an everybody game that truly forgoes any kind of interface in favor of immersion, right? They're like, we really want you to feel like you're in this world, like you're moving around it. It's very like sound oriented. It's very tactile. You're sort of invested in the character. And so anything that was like a number or a button press would only serve to like pull away from that. And there are other games that are also super immersive, like Elite Dangerous comes to mind for me, but they have really complex overlays. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, Chris, do you feel like you have to get rid of a UI or minimize a UI in some way to make a game immersive, or are there ways to get around that?
I'm trying to think of a game. It feels immersive, but but there's still stuff on the screen. And like the only thing I can really think of, it had like a terrible like item selection screen, but I thought it did a kind of neat way of showing your stats, was The Division. And because it would have like a kind of small screen that would pop up next to you. And the only reason it didn't break immersion is because it kind of felt like it was high tech. So like it was like a hologram almost that popped out near you.
Yeah, it was like your watch or something, right?
Yeah. And so they were kind of able to get around it that way almost, to like have it on screen and be a part of you with it while it's still giving you a ton of information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's like making the UI a part of the world, even if it's still like UI.
Yeah.
Bob, what about you?
Destiny 2 comes to mind a little bit with the ghost being part of the UI and him being there with you. But, I mean, even with Destiny, they have a nice UI, but it's still pretty cluttered on the screen. I wouldn't say cluttered, but it's definitely noticeable there. Only thing I can really think of, at least immersive for me, is I'm just saying this because I was playing Battlefield 4 multiplayer not too long ago, going the super hardcore modes in first-person shooters where they pull your HUD from you and you're fully immersed. Like you're listening for footsteps, you're listening for calls from teammates because you don't have a objective on your screen. You don't have a HUD telling you what like a mini map or anything like that.
Where
But
people are,
I feel like
or like
yeah. Health, ammo, anything like that. You have just a small little thing in the bottom corner saying, yeah, you have a pistol in your hand. Good luck.
Feels like they could have even done away with that. That's interesting.
You have to just pop a couple shots. Okay, I got my pistol out. Okay. That's a pistol.
That's what that is.
Well, so that is interesting, though, that like the more hardcore mode sort of not necessarily assumes, but requires that there is less UI, right? Because it literally is a gameplay assist that's there to facilitate a gameplay thing, right? Where when we pull that away, when we pull the UI itself away, we're more invested in sort of what's happening, or we feel like we're more there.
It's, in a way, having some of those things in a first-person shooter like Battlefield makes it more immersive, because when you're just playing with a screen, you don't kind of get all of the like the subtleties around you like you would if you were there in real life. And so the UI might be trying to communicate that in a way. So like if there are gunshots, it's really hard to tell like with just audio what direction it's going. But if you see a little red dot on the map, it can kind of tell you that, and that kind of mimics what we would be able to do in real life.
Yeah, that's true. I have this problem though where like whenever there's a mini map, on a shooter game, I fucking stare at that thing. That's all I can do. And whenever I played Warzone, I had this problem where I had to I have to literally focus my brain on not staring at the minimap because my eye just wants to go there anytime anything is happening, and I end up missing what's actually happening in front of my video game eyes. So that kind of mode where no one has that is actually, that kind of game mode actually seems pretty appealing to me because then I don't have to have that handicap of the mini map at all times.
I hate that game mode. I despise it. I'm so bad at it.
I talked a little bit about In Other Waters, but I feel like it's worth bringing up again.
Okay.
This is like sort of a space game where the gameplay is basically like navigating this scuba person or scuba robot underwater.
Listen, is it space or is it water?
It's another planet, so I guess it's terrestrial, but not the Earth.
Okay.
And terrestrial is maybe not the right word. It's aquatic.
Aquatic?
Anyway, aquatic.
Not aquatic. Aquatic.
Aquatic. But what's interesting about it is the game is basically UI. Like if you look it up and look at it, it looks like a bunch of dots on a screen and you have like little control-y symbols in the bottom left-hand corner. The entire game is UI. But it's like, because that's what you're seeing, it's freeing your mind to imagine what everything else looks like. There are no in-game models of the like alien species. All of them are described by people who are in the game, text or like codexes, but there's actually no pictures or anything like that in the game of any of it. So it's really sort of utilizing like your built-in capabilities to imagine things instead of leaning on trying to get everything possible on the screen, which is an interesting take. It's like if everything is UI, then you have to make up in your head what everything looks like.
It's like D&D.
It's kind of like D&D or like reading a book, right? Like books are immersive in a certain way, but you're doing a lot of that processing on your own. So it's cool to see a video game where video is very much a part of that experience, sort of lean into that same mechanic, quote unquote.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Another game that came to mind for just immersiveness that it took me a second to remember. It was Dishonored.
Oh yeah.
Because that game, the UI wasn't massive. I mean, you literally had your health gauge and your ability gauge. And I think the bottom right had like your weapon. But the fact that your abilities and the way you played, it was on you. It was your view of the world dictated how you got to play. So if you wanted to stick to the path of only harming those who harmed you, you could play the silent mode. You could knock people out,
like teleport on rooftops, sneak through vents.
Yeah, you could blink through everything and just knock out people and hide them in closets or hide them somewhere, or you could just kick in the door and assassinate everyone and turn them to ash. You felt like you were part of the storyline, and I especially remember, because I've played through, I think 3 times now, the final mission, pretty much all the guards are based on what path you took. So if you took the silent, only killed like your target's approach, it was a very easy path to the end because there weren't many guards. But if you went the full-on like bloodthirsty murder hobo route, the last area was just packed full of guards. Like, because that's the path I went the first time I played through, because I was like, I just want to get through this game, and these abilities are awesome.
Yeah.
So I can just wave my hand and blast 20 people against a wall. And I just remember coming in that first room and just getting looked at by all these people. I'm just like, oh. Hi.
Yeah, it's interesting pulling up that gameplay and looking at it, because it's actually like, even though the UI on the screen is like stylized, it is very present. And I wonder if part of what's immersive about immersive sims like Dishonored is that choice and freedom of movement within the world, right? All of that UI, because it's kind of stylized, fades in the background because you're focusing so much on traversing.
And the fact that what you're doing matters. Like the way you interact with the environment around you matters to the rest of the game. There are a lot of games like you could just murder hobo the entire time. It doesn't change the fact that what you're going to do later is going to be difficult or hard. And I think that's like the coolest thing. I didn't know that about Dishonored. I feel like I might have heard that like when they were originally talking about it, but I completely forgot. And I think that's so cool. And that is one of the things that bothers me in Ghost of Tsushima. There are supplies in games, and like this island is at war. Like there are like peasants just getting thrown out of their village, and or like their houses taken, or like they have nothing. They're starving, and you can go into their house where they're staying, and there's supplies, and you can just take those supplies, and there's no repercussions. And it's kind of like they're right there. Just go eat. It's right there. And
so there's a sense, there's that immersion doesn't only break when there's like something visually for us on the screen. The immersion breaks when there's something that makes sense in your head that doesn't make sense in the world, right? Or something that the world is showing you that doesn't necessarily make sense given the context the world is giving you.
Right. And the reason they have those supplies there is because it's a resource necessary to upgrade your weapons. So they need to be around the world for you to find so you can upgrade your weapons. So it's like they made a conscious decision to have them hidden around the world, but that they didn't really affect the story in a way, if that makes sense. So like you upgrading your weapons and finding supplies in people's houses that are supposed to be ransacked or whatever has nothing to do with the fact that they're starving based on the story that's being told.
Right.
And it's just it's a little jarring.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And another way that like to think of the opposite of that, like you're building immersiveness by having sort of congruity between what you're talking about in the story and what you're visually seeing and what you're playing on the screen, making sense.
Yeah, and the fact that I can just walk in and take it. And I mean, maybe it's because I'm a lord of Tsushima or whatever. So people are like, oh, well, he needs it. He's a lord.
It's one of the reasons I really appreciate Earth Defense Force, because they're like, oh my god, giant aliens are attacking the city. And then there are, in fact, giant aliens attacking the city.
That game is... The immersion in that game, let me tell you.
The immersion, so deep.
So realistic.
So deep.
Man, whew.
Woof.
They look like giant frogs.
They're
just like people.
Oh, it's great. The commentary is good. To die for it, Earth Defense Force. Well, I think we're going to wrap there. Thanks to both of you for being here tonight, especially thanks for Bob for being here tonight. Appreciate you, Bob.
Glad to be here.
Good to have you. And we're going to sign off. So say goodnight, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. If you want to reach out to us, you can do so by going to bit.ly/discobrew. You can also do that by going to, by sending us an email or finding us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And, we have a website, www.thegamebrew.com.
.edu.
It's educational. .org. We will take donations. It's .com.
Pretty sure we were
It's .com. I'm probably .gov soon. All right. Bye. Whoopsie. I meant to click on the show chat and instead I clicked on the red hang up button.